Hello, my name is Robert Haddad, and today I'll be speaking on the topic, Vladimir Putin, a great Christian leader? Vladimir Putin and Russia are currently dominating the news because of the dramatic events underway in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin has been the leader of Russia for over 20 years. In that time, he has earned many supporters and many detractors. Among some Catholics, especially those of Middle Eastern background, Putin is a hero for a variety of reasons, including the following. He is a strong and decisive leader that has restored Russia after the post-Soviet collapse and chaos. He has spoken about the tragic decline of Christianity, while most other leaders in the world have remained silent. He appears in Russian Orthodox churches to pray and allows the Russian Orthodox Church to thrive and have political influence. He has placed tighter restrictions on abortion in Russia, the first nation to introduce this terrible practice. He did so in the year 2011. Putin has supported the banning of internet sites promoting child pornography, drugs and suicide. This was done in 2012. Putin has supported the banning of intentional public blasphemy and desecration, a law introduced in 2013. Putin has supported the Christians of the Middle East by militarily supporting the Assad regime against the Islamist forces that tried to overthrow it in Syria. And most notably, Putin has supported laws banning LGBTQI and transgender propaganda in Russia, again done in 2013. Other things could also be mentioned as well. All of the above are highly commendable, particularly in the face of Western leaders and governments who currently seem hell-bent on destroying what's left of Christian culture and civilization. We see this in the many actions of the Obama and Biden administrations, the actions of Justin Trudeau in Canada, many European leaders today, just to name a few of the most renowned. Catholics who support Putin are very vocal in attacking Western leaders and governments for their misguided, destructive, and so-called woke agendas. This is a good thing and needs to be praised and continued. However, I find that many Catholics who support and publicly praise Putin strangely fail to mention and critique any of his faults, to the point of total silence. The same either appear to be wholly ignorant of Putin's faults, or worse, deliberately brush them under the carpet, or worse still, when one tries to mention any of his faults to such supporters, one runs the risk of receiving pushback tinged with anger. It is almost like, how dare you criticize Saint Vladimir? In such cases, the support of Vladimir Putin has obviously reached imbalance, if not cultic proportions. I believe that objectivity must always prevail. All leaders, whether religious, political, or otherwise, should be assessed for all their words and actions, good and bad. This should apply also to Vladimir Putin. I've mentioned earlier many of Putin's good actions. However, there are many words and actions that should greatly alarm Catholics and all people of goodwill. For example, he has reduced Russia effectively to a one-party state again. Elections have no more credibility in Russia due to the repression of all effective political opposition. Political opponents are harassed, arrested, charged with trumped-up charges, imprisoned, beaten, and even murdered. Over 20 public opponents of Putin in Russia and overseas have been murdered through poisons or bullets to the back of the head, in old-style KGB fashion. The most famous include Alexander Litvinenko and Boris Nemtsov. Those assassinated also include Sergei Magnitsky, an accountant who was investigating the massive theft of public monies by Putin and his supporters, and was found beaten to death in his prison in 2008. There have been others who providentially escaped Putin's assassins, including Viktor Yushchenko, running for the Ukrainian presidency in 2004. Through abuse of his office, Putin has amassed a private fortune of over 250 billion US dollars, especially through kickbacks he receives from his many oligarch supporters. He's probably the wealthiest person in the world today, all at the expense of the Russian people. Under Putin, the Russian government has been reduced to a collection of kleptocrats or thieves. Putin's private residence, or palace as it is nicknamed, on the Black Sea coast near Chelmsik, is said to be worth nearly 1.4 billion US dollars. This is astonishing wealth for someone who reportedly only earns 117,000 US dollars per annum. After 30 years of marriage, Putin announced a civilized divorce from his wife Ludmila in June 2013. State television dutifully reported the story for a day, then dropped all mention of the former First Lady, as though she had never existed. Putin's two daughters' names are publicly known, but they have never appeared in public. Putin has created a Russia where people can, just like the old Soviet days, simply be photoshopped out of history. Russian sport has been corrupted by the Putin regime, returning to state-sponsored doping practices of the Soviet era, resulting in Russia's formal banning from the Olympics. While supporting Christians in the Middle East through support of the Assad regime, Putin keeps in place many vile regimes that suppress Christians, including the Kim dynasty in North Korea, Maduro in Venezuela, Diaz-Canel in Cuba, Ortega in Nicaragua, and before them Mugabe in Zimbabwe. Before the current war in the Ukraine, Putin waged war by attacking Georgia in 2008, illegally invaded and partitioned Crimea from the Ukraine in 2014, as well as the Donbas region, and secretly supported the Taliban in Afghanistan. The current war against the Ukraine is a very complex issue. I personally would prefer that Ukraine remain a neutral state, neither a perceived threat to Russia as part of NATO, but clearly independent of Russia, free of all intimidation and domination. However, Putin's comments since mid-2021 show that he has a contempt for Ukrainian identity and Ukrainian nationhood as a whole. This smacks of both racism and imperialism, a determination to restore the old Russian or Soviet imperial domination of non-Russian Eastern peoples. I'm reminded of Putin's comments to the Russian Duma, or Parliament, in 2005, when he publicly lamented the fall of the Soviet Union as, quote, the greatest strategic geopolitical catastrophe of the century, the 20th century. I fail to see how any Catholic or Christian could lament the fall of the Soviet Empire unless one harbored at least some nostalgia for its past. Of greatest current concern from a Catholic Christian point of view is Putin's alignment with Communist China, the greatest and most aggressive atheist power in history. This alignment has been years in the making and now is a formal alliance in all but name. As Putin recently put it, quote, a partnership without limits, presumably including military partnership. Putin seems content for such a partnership to develop without him publicly expressing any concern about China's repression of Catholics or other Christians, Tibetans, and the Uyghurs. At a time when the decadent West is ripe for chastisement, this alliance bodes deeply ill for the future. Putin appears to be more and more unhinged in his public comments and actions. In the lead up to and during the current assault against the Ukrainian state and people, we see the classic characteristics of an unrestrained dictator. A liar, a megalomaniac, a warmonger and killer are just a few terms that come to mind. Again, from an objective perspective, Putin has various good points and strengths, but as outlined in this presentation, he has many other serious flaws and evils. He, in many respects, is not worse than recent leaders of the United States, for example, but neither should he be beyond criticism, nor should he be canonized. If Christians in the West are looking for an inspirational political leader, they would do better to admire Duda of Poland or Orban of Hungary and stop being apologists for a deeply flawed individual. I believe that Russia will ultimately triumph in the current conflict with Ukraine, despite the epic courage of the Ukrainian people. This triumph, however, will not see the end of conflict in Europe. Putin has made it clear that Eastern Europe ought to be Russia's sphere of influence. He will probably next eye the Baltic states, and then after them Poland. My ultimate fear is that we are heading towards a great war, sometime during this current decade, wherein China and Russia will ally to be instruments of chastisement upon the morally and religiously corrupt West. Whatever form it ultimately takes, this chastisement is believed by some to form part of the third secret of Fatima, still not revealed, and definitely foretold in the publicly revealed and approved message of Our Lady of Akita, revealed in 1973. A war in which Russia is ravaging Europe and China ravaging the Pacific will test all our spiritual resources, both as individual Catholics and the Catholic Church overall. Perhaps if and when this time comes, the Pope, whoever he may be at the time, will finally do what Our Lady requested at Fatima in 1917 and later in 1929, namely consecrate Russia, specifically by name, to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, in union with the bishops of the world, in order to inaugurate finally the era of peace and restoration she promised the world back then. This is our great hope. God bless.